we are drawing to a close of 2022. And I thought it'd be a fun thing to look back over the year and decide whether 2022 was a good year for Dead by Daylight. I think there were going to be differences of opinions in this one. I feel like it might be like a pretty big divide of what people think of it. So I have gone back through the year and I've taken all of the major events of 2022. But what we're going to do is we're going to go on this tier list and we're going to rate each of the things that have happened. And overall, we should come away with an idea of whether or not this was, or has been, sorry, a good year for Dead by Daylight. So we're going to go through each and every one of them, and we're going to talk about what they were, what they changed in the game, what happened with them. And then we are going to talk about whether or not it was a good thing or a bad thing for the game overall. Starting with the Lunar New Year. So in Lurking Stripes, we didn't have much. Like, I don't really remember this event. I remember the red envelopes, and that was like literally it. But there was nothing really special about this event. It was a pretty formulaic event where you interacted with something in the trials that would give you extra blood points. Everything was kind of jazzed up to look a bit different. There were fireworks on the gens. There were fireworks on the hooks. Like, it was an incredibly formulaic event. So for me, I would probably like straight up put the New Year probably there. I'm making a prediction right now that this is going to be a common theme for all of the events. I think the majority of the events this year were kind of mid. Next up, we have Sadako Rising, which, like, dead ass, I forgot happened this year. I love the trailer. I thought the trailer was bang on. They got the vibe of Sadako down from the trailer. I remember watching this and being hyped as fuck. And it seemed to do okay at the beginning. But then, I think what killed Sadako was the dredge coming out. Because in Sadako, you have a teleporting killer who uses TVs to teleport around the map. And then you've got the dredge, whose major power is to teleport around the map into lockers, which is basically the same. And then he also has the added anti-loop ability, and he has Nightfall, which basically just all in all makes him a stronger killer in comparison. So then nobody was playing Sadako. If we're looking at it from an objective viewpoint, if we're looking at it from when it released and what the chapter was, I would say that Sadako Rising was pretty good. The next one is something which has been a running thing throughout the year, which was the Prime Gaming team up. I feel like this year was a real letdown in terms of what we've already had. So, it was like fine, that's a fairly nice Hattie outfit. Fine, that's an okay Jeff outfit. And then this came out in August. And I remember everybody being in uproar because this was a Plague outfit that was already in the game. This wasn't an exclusive. This was something that was already in. And then they followed it with some blood points. I feel like in 2 months, they destroyed Prime Gaming. Fallen from grace. All right, moving on from Prime Gaming, we get into the 11th tomes. Tome 10 came out in 2022? Did it? What was Tome 10? Saw? It was released in January? What? Lizzie, thank you for popping over. I appreciate it.
Your mind can be your sanctuary.
What?
Or your prison.
Yo, that's kind of a fucking cool trailer. I can't believe I didn't see that. I would say this is a pretty good tome.
As Captain Pierce leads the weary
So this was tome
travelers
11,
through the
which was called
unknown.
Devotion,
They happen
and this was
upon
when
an
David and
abandoned
Twins came
tower.
out. Oh yeah, tome 11, we got the pirate themed outfit for Twins, didn't we? That was a very cool outfit. However, still no cosmetic for Victor, which just really annoys me. Tome 11, I don't remember much about. I feel like it was definitely overshadowed by the fact that David coming out as LGBT happened at the same time. I would say it's overhyped. I might take out overhyped and just have it as not too bad. Along with Tome 11, we of course had the first LGBT character being announced, which was David. David coming out as gay. Now, David coming out as gay is one of the most controversial things I feel like that happened this year in Dead by Daylight. David coming out as gay was a god tier announcement. Now, I might be biased. I can't see why a step forward in representation is a bad thing. Yes, there could be debates on whether or not it should have been an original character, or the fact that it was a previously established character was a good thing or a bad thing. Should it have been locked behind a paywall? Should it not have been? Should it have been one of the free characters? Should it have not have been? All of these are fair questions to ask. What I do want to see going forward, though, is a brand new character with a brand new LGBT story. Next up, we have the Mori rework. Now, this is a bit of a difficult one because technically this isn't in the game yet, and we only had a PTB to test this. I still think it was important to talk about because it was a major point of this year. So for those of you who didn't know about it, the Mori rework went a little bit as follows. Once the 4th survivor was knocked down, they would go straight into what was called the finishing Mori. Along with this, we had an unbreakable base kit because they feared that slugging would become part of the new meta. So they tried to counter that straight off the bat by having unbreakable base kit. Which, by the way, I made a video about this, but it didn't fucking counter it. It just prolonged the slugging, if anything. And it was one of the worst ideas I feel like Behavior ever had. Overall, the Mori rework was trash. There's no other way of putting it. It was trash. 100%. On to the next big thing, which was probably the biggest thing that happened in Dead by Daylight this year. So if you guys don't remember, around again, during the 6th anniversary broadcast, they announced that they were going to overhaul the most commonly used perks. So some of the examples of the perks they changed. On the killer side, barbecue and chili, which I think was just removing the blood point incentive, which was ridiculous. It wasn't even really a necessary change for me. Corrupt intervention, Scourge hook pain resonance, ruin. They killed ruin. Pop Goes the Weasel got changed as well. On the survivor side, we had Dead Hard. Borrowed Time got a major change. Borrowed Time became a base kit around this point as well. DS got changed. Iron Will got killed. Nobody used Iron Will anymore. Self-Care got nerfed, which was so fucking ridiculous, the fact that Self-Care got nerfed. There were a lot of really big changes that really shook up what the game was and how people played it and what they went in with like their typical loadout to be. Overall, where would we put it? The perk overhaul and meta shakeup. I think I personally would put it at pretty good. Whatever you think of the individual nerfs and buffs of each of the perks, that feels kind of irrelevant. I think the biggest thing about it was the fact that Behavior were willing to shake up the meta. They were willing to basically go in, take the most popular perks, and completely rework them. That was going to piss a lot. That was like a risky thing to do. You're essentially taking what people have grown comfortable with in the game, what people have loved about the game, and you're saying, hey, well, fuck you, I'm taking it into something else, and completely changing it and forcing people to play in a different way, which is kind of a risky move if you think about it. Along with the Mori rework, and the perk overhaul, we also had one other major gameplay change, which was the Prestige rework. So beforehand, for the people who didn't know before this, you would have to unlock them as a teachable. That didn't then automatically unlock it in the loadout of each of the other survivors. It allowed you to find it in the blood web of the other survivors. Instead of that, you now just automatically unlock the perks on all of the characters as soon as you manage to get to Prestige 1 for the survivor, which I think was so much better. For me, hands down, the Prestige rework was one of the best things to happen this year to the game. The next thing I had was quality of life changes. This was the thing like the way the wiggle changed. They had preset loadouts. They updated the visuals on the game. They changed the way the archives worked so that you could have like 2 challenges. You could have a streamer challenge. You could have a killer challenge. They had a streamer mode. They had bots. So this is where we talk about bots as well. Overall, taking all of it in, the quality of life changes I would put as pretty good. They weren't god tier. I feel like some of them weren't as good as they could have been or maybe should have been. Next up, we have the Roots of Dread chapters. I remember watching this trailer and being genuinely scared. Like, it was so well put together. It felt like a genuine little horror movie. I feel like there are 2 things that we need to acknowledge before we get into what the chapter even provided. The first thing, the leak that happened before this. Do you guys remember the leak of Hattie and Dredge, their character models, being leaked? Like, I feel like it was like a month before this game even came out. Before the DLC even came out. The second thing is that this came straight after Sadako. Dredge and Sadako are very similar killers in terms of how they teleport around the map and how that is basically the way that they create pressure around the trial. Those are 2 things to take into account because I feel like the Dredge really killed any hype that Sadako had, first of all, but then the leaks killed any hype that the Dredge had, which was a bit of a shame. And then, of course, with the chapter came the new map, Garden of Joy, which is the worst map in the game. Okay, Garden of Joy is without a doubt the worst map in Dead by Daylight. It wasn't I'm trying to be nice about it, but I feel like just straight up, this was a bad chapter. Overall, you don't see many of the perks being used. You don't see Hattie taking frontline and centering much. Dredge feels like somebody It feels like a killer that people hate going up against. Every time a dredge comes into the game, people despise it. The map sucks. I don't think it was necessarily trash, but I'm going to put it in not too bad. But it's like literally like a little bit above trash. Around the same time as Roots of Dread came out, we had the 6th anniversary, the Twisted Masquerade event. It was, again, a very formulaic event. Let's look at what you did. You interacted with something in the trial, which gave you extra blood points and then the chance to unlock a cosmetic. You had specific cosmetics, which, again, was exactly the same as what was in the Lunar event. As events go, for the 6th anniversary event, I honestly expected more. Not because it was a bad event, necessarily, but because it was exactly the same as every other event that we've seen so far. You know, I feel like I would put it here. I feel like it should have had more to it than any of the other events that were in the game this year. It was the 6th anniversary. It's an anniversary event. Those are meant to be big events. Those are meant to be big things. And instead, we got the same formulaic, repetitive stuff that we get with every other thing that happened. You may have liked it more than the Lunar event, but when you look at what they actually did from the gameplay's perspective, it was exactly the same. And I feel like they should be kind of marked down for that. The next thing to talk about, which I feel like was a really interesting thing. This was in July. The Attack on Titan collab. Now this, I remember, was one of the most hyped things ever. I remember they announced this during the 6th anniversary event, and people lost their minds for this. I feel like in the first week after it was delivered, everybody was running an Attack on Titan cosmetic. But think, how often do you see an Attack on Titan cosmetic nowadays? Because I don't see many. I think that this one is pretty clear-cut. I think it should go here. Then we move on to Tome 12, which was called Discordance, and it was the Blight Tome and the Jonah Tome. Is this when Maurice disappeared and when Maurice disappeared with the dredge? Oh yeah, Maurice did disappear with the dredge, didn't he? Okay, well in that case we need to just do that. Okay, moving on back into so I feel like Tome 12 was the worst of the year. I don't remember much about Tome 12. I don't think it brought in any major new cosmetics that were really cool. It just kind of felt like it was there. I don't see much from it. I honestly feel like that was pretty trash Tome. Nothing really happened with it. Nothing came off the back of it. After Tome 12, we had what I'm sure everybody's very excited to talk about. One of the biggest events of 2022 for Dead by Daylight. Of course, Hooked on You. Let's just watch the last trailer actually once. It's been so long since I've watched it. Okay, let's talk about if it was God tier. A lot of people have already made this point. It did fall off after release. It was kind of this like distant memory fever dream of people being like, oh my god, did you play that game, Hooked on You? Kind of crazy, right? Kind of weird, right? And then everybody just kind of forgot about it. I feel like what Hooked on You showed the player base and behavior is that the world could be expanded. I feel like it will open up a bunch of new possibilities on what Dead by Daylight could be, where it could go. It introduces more of a hint of longevity to it. In terms of where we put it, I would say pretty good. That might be one of the most controversial decisions I make, but I would stick Hooked on You dating sim and pretty good. I'm not putting it on God tier. I'm not putting Hooked on You on God tier. It is not God tier, all right? Okay, so off the back of a Hooked on You dating sim, we have Resident Evil Chapter 2 Project W. Can we acknowledge how Meg is always being screwed by the devs? And like every time they create a trailer where somebody has to die, it's Meg. Let's start with Wesker. Wesker was such an outlier in terms of the killers this year because everybody was playing him. Like, you know, obviously you get the initial hype of killers being played where everybody's playing them for like a week. But Wesker still gets played so much. And Project W came out 4 months ago. This chapter started my shrimping obsession for Wesker. I need a man to choke and eat me like Wesker. Yeah. All right. Let's address the elephant in the room. Wesker is someone that everybody was like, oh my god, give me some of that. And the fact that he can choke survivors didn't really help with that and definitely made it worse. We are not factoring in whether or not Wesker is fuckable into our rating of this event and this chapter. Okay? The survivors that got brought in, Rebecca and Ada, were excellent. Rebecca was somebody that a lot of people now main. Rebecca is a very common survivor to see. And Ada, for Resident Evil fans in particular, was an awesome addition to the game. And their perks as well were pretty good. All of their perks seem to fit into wider builds and either change them slightly or just accent and make them better, which I think is exactly what we want from perks. Ooh, I might get flack by that. I'm going to put in God tier. After this, we have the Haunted by Daylight event. I like how the two messages off the back of this was Miles putting, oh, trash tier easy, and then MB being like, I highly rate this one. Now, let's break down what this event was. It was interacting with something in the trial, the Voids, a bunch of new cosmetics which you could unlock for a tome and also buy. Sound familiar? This event, again, was so formulaic into the rest of the event as well. For me, again, like all of the rest of them, this one goes in okay. Just because, again, like I want to see more from the events. All right, next up, we have Tome 13, which was, of course, Danny's chapter. There it is. This single-handedly here carried this rift. This as well, right. I feel like we can't ignore the Deep Rift. This new Deep Rift that they brought in, which was brand new to this tome, is phenomenal. They also added the community things. Overall, I feel like hands down, this has got to. Like, this was such a good tome, and this set the stage for the next tomes, which I'm very excited about. Off the back of Tome 13, off the back of the Halloween event, we had the next chapter and the last chapter of this year, Forged in Fog. Now, this saw the introduction of the Knight, Vittorio, and the map Shattered Board, or Shattered Square, or whatever the fuck it's called. I don't actually know. I honestly think that, for me, this goes straight there. The Knight had such a good concept, but it was so poorly executed. Vittorio, the only thing going for this chapter at all was Vittorio, and not because he was a good survivor, but because he was an attractive character model, and everybody was shrimping over him. And that was literally the only reason that people actually hyped up this chapter to any capacity. It was like the most poorly delivered chapter I've ever seen. Moving on to the final event of the year, the final thing that happened in the year in terms of what behavior delivered, which is, of course, the Bone Chill event, which is actually still happening now. They had some good ideas with the Bone Chill event. The first good idea that they had was the fact that killers could now get into snowmans. That was really, really cool because it increases the camaraderie and kind of almost created this temporary bridge between survivors and killers in a really fun way. I really liked that. I thought that was one of the best parts of it. I think I'm going to go against the herd, and I'm going to say it was an okay event. There's no way it's better than the Twisted Masquerade. It was, because the Twisted Masquerade should have been more. Two more things to discuss. The first thing is the Light in the Fog event. Now, this wasn't run by Behavior, but it was such a major staple of this year for Dead by Daylight and the community that I feel like we should talk about it. If you don't know what Light in the Fog is, it's essentially a charity fundraising event for Poppers, who is a quite big figurehead in the Dead by Daylight community who suffers with ALS. It's not even a conversation for me. Light in the Fog goes a bit. Like, the event itself was amazing. How they organized it was amazing. Everybody coming together and raising, I think, even more money this year than they did last year was phenomenal. And it was exactly how you should do a Dead by Daylight community tournament. The last thing we gotta talk about is the cheater epidemic. This was something which marred the reputation of Dead by Daylight and Behavior throughout this year so much that we need to talk about it. It was one of the biggest things that the community were talking about this year, me included. I made many videos about it, and you know, Behavior had to address it multiple times and what they were doing about it. And I think all of this came to a head with the cheating epidemic when two of the biggest fog whisperers on the platform said that they were close to quitting the game, and one of them even did take a break from the game because of it. And that was, of course, Spooky Loops and Artstava. Artstava was the one who actually did take a break from Dead by Daylight for a little bit. When that happened, I do feel like Behavior was kicked into gear, but I feel like that's a mark against them because it took literally getting to the point where two of the biggest content creators were saying, I'm not playing anymore, before Behavior actually started to take it seriously. But all in all, this year, it was too little too late in many ways, and this was the biggest fuck up of this year. The cheating epidemic was the worst thing that was happening in Dead by Daylight in 2022, and I feel like tarnished many people's vision of the game for the entire year. I would put that down as a large reason as to why the player base has crashed throughout the year. It was at 29,000 in April. It hasn't been that low since February of 2020. Different things will affect it, and that's how any game will go. But overall, what we've seen during this year is a dip in players. But this is my general breakdown of the year and the events. What's interesting is that there are so many more things that I've put in like okay or pretty good or god tier in comparison to things that were not too bad, fallen from grace, or trash. Overall though, I would say that 2022 as a general year falls into not too bad. I feel like it would be here. If we combine everything, if we look at everything, it wasn't a bad year. It wasn't a great year. It wasn't necessarily an okay year. I think overall we've seen a dip in player base. We've seen the game being threatened in ways that it hasn't been before. We've seen a lot more negative events, and those are the biggest things as well. The events in the chapters, those are the things you need to get right. Everything else is kind of whatever, but those were the things they were getting wrong more than they were getting right. And I think that's what pulls it into the not too bad section rather than something that's amazing. I do see Dead by Daylight dying. I don't think it will die soon, but like any game, it has a lifespan. And it's a shame that the lifespan isn't just naturally tapering off, kind of like dying of old age almost. But it seems to be dying a little bit more from the fact that behavior are fucking up. And behavior are doing things that are hurting the game's reputation and hurting the player base's trust in them. I agree, Dax. The thing that I really hope behavior do next year is I want them to slow down on how many chapters they release. And I want them to take some time to work on the game. They did it a little bit this year with the prestige reworks and the quality of life improvements and all this kind of stuff, but it always felt like it was kind of buried under the new chapter, the new event, the new this, the new that, the new thing that was meant to get money from us rather than allow us to actually enjoy the game and work on the game and allow the game to flourish. I think the biggest thing they need to do is focus on the quality of life of the game, take some time to do an Operation Health, calm down on the chapter release, and fix the cheaters. That's the biggest thing. They need to fix the cheaters. If they don't fix the cheaters, we're fucked. So let me break it all down for you. I ain't never giving up, I ain't never giving up. Taking that crown from you.